Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Game Ready podcast. We have our one of our favorite guests returning, Dr. Yass. If you remember the previous podcast, we talked about pain and how lifting weights can actually help manage pain. And Doc, he expanded on it pretty well, and all the feedback has been really positive. So, my mission when I got into this industry was to help youth athletes and really be a proponent in helping youth athletes enjoy the whole process of playing sports. And one of those processes is training. So, we're gonna cover three just basic questions about lifting, and I'm gonna get Dr. Yaz's perspective on that. And go ahead, kick it off, Doc.
Thanks for having me again, Ernest, by the way. And I think that it is wonderful that more and more adolescents are getting into sports. There's so many life lessons that can be gained from participating in sports. To me, the greatest lesson that you could learn in life is about discipline and commitment.
Yes.
And that is to say that you set a goal, you recognize that you have certain requirements to achieve the goal, and you recognize that things aren't always going to be handed to you so easily, that you're going to have to work hard. And you're going to have to stay committed, and you're going to have to learn, and there's going to be ups and downs, and there'll be trials and tribulations. And so these are the great life lessons that an adolescent can gain from being in sport. But the reality is that there's a physical component to participating. And so the best thing that that individual can do is condition themselves for the opportunity to participate. And not only does it allow them to prevent themselves from injuring themselves, but in allowing the body to perform optimally, it's going to allow them to get the most from doing the sport and enjoying it, greater. So I think that the two really do have to go hand in hand. And I just hope, especially parents, recognize that there really does need to be a strength training component to your child participating in sports. I just think it's really, really important.
Yes, it is. I totally agree, and I'm biased on the fact because I've seen the results that that actually just participating in a strength program for, I'd say, like 18 to 24 months can bear a lot of be very beneficial to youth athletes in so many different ways. The mental aspect, like you said, the discipline aspect, and then in developing a work ethic to pursue, and actually, my opinion, also gives them the groundwork to continue this when as they get older.
Oh, absolutely. That's the essence of it being a life lesson. Is that, listen, you're going to get out of high school, you're going to get out of college, you're going to want to have a job, you're going to want to have a successful family. Those types of lessons of nothing comes easy, working hard pays dividends. That's going to help in your relationships. That's going to help in your long-term occupation. So there's no doubt that if you could learn this stuff early in those teen years, you're going to have a successful adult life. So I agree, this should be carried over throughout life.
Exactly. And I had a few questions. You basically covered the benefits of long-term, basically of weightlifting. How does it coincide? Basically, I think we already covered this, but long-term athletic development, that's like a buzzword, a buzz term, if you want to talk about it, and in developing youth athletes and not having a cookie cutter sort of program that addresses developing youth athletes into becoming better athletes. So the weightlifting aspect is a big piece of that.
So let's just talk about one of the things that I don't think people really understand about. So you're going through adolescence, right? And everyone talks about that growth jump, that shooting up. The kid grows 4 inches, 6 inches in a few months. I want people to understand this concept. Let's just say we're talking about the thigh itself, right? So we have your thigh bone, your femur, right? And all of a sudden, bam, in the next 6 months, this kid grows 4 to 5 inches. What that means is that thigh bone just grew, extended its length several inches, right? Now, you have to understand that the thigh muscle, the quadricep, is attached. So in this massive growth of the bone, because the muscle is attached, the muscle suddenly lengthened. Now, because of that, its ability to create force has been impeded.
Yes.
Because it's become overstretched and muscles create a greater force, it's optimal force at a certain optimal length. So what you want to recognize is that because there's been an alteration of the muscle length, it may suddenly now have a little difficulty supporting the kneecap in the joint. So this teenage athlete who's trying to utilize their body more effectively in performing a sport may end up suddenly having knee pain. And so it would be nice if people would stop a second and say, well, maybe this is associated with the growth process that's occurred, and all we need to do is try to work a little bit on strengthening the quad to try to return some of the thickening of the muscle that was there prior to it suddenly having to explode in its length. And so I want people to recognize that when that kid is going through that growth phase, it's actually not a bad thing to be incorporating some generalized strength training simply to recognize that the muscles are going to be asking for that, right? They're going to be wanting that because just as the bone is extending dramatically, the muscle is being asked to lengthen, and that kind of can make it lose its ability to create force. So
very true.
Don't be afraid of that idea. There's always been, we had this conversation once where there's that thing that's been out there forever that strength training somehow dwarfs an adolescent's ability to grow. And that's basically been completely dispelled.
Yes, exactly. Could you expound on that a little bit and show the research that you read?
Sure. So what happened was, as the 80s came along in the 90s and more money was seen to be going into athletics, more people thought to themselves, well, if my kid is interested in athletics, well, that's great. So let's have them participate, and maybe there's a scholarship somewhere in the future for them. And that's great. That's a good thing. Well, as a result of that, you had a lot of kids, this massive infusion of kids trying to play sports, but there also wasn't the simultaneous recognition that they need to condition themselves for the sport. So we had this massive rise in emergency room visits of sports-related injuries to kids and adolescents. And so the American Academy of Pediatrics recognized that something was going on and something needed to be done. So they changed their preposition as to when children can actually do modified or moderate levels of weightlifting, not just push-ups and sit-ups, but literally weightlifting, bench pressing, squatting, but at a moderate level of resistance, all the way down to the age of 8.
Wow.
So any child over the age of, there's the American Academy of Pediatrics acknowledges that any child over the age of 8 who is playing a sport can perform moderate strength training, which is to say that the level of resistance should not be extreme. It should be moderate, 50% of their maximum effort. So there was a recognition and a change in the policy so that it is now okay for children over the age of 8 to be doing moderate levels of strength training.
And it makes sense. You know, I don't train any athletes under the age of 10. If they do, it has to be a special circumstance.
Right.
And really, when they do, I know their training experience is extremely limited. So we only do body weight work.
Right.
Everything's body weight. Everything's basically 3 premises of being able to do a push-up, a body weight squat, and a lunge. And then we build from there. And then as they become a little bit more acclimated into the environment and they're able to understand the cues, we progress from there. We maybe will touch a dumbbell and a kettlebell. or a sandbag, and then we'll move forward from there. And I've had pretty good success with training youth athletes in that way. And I'm a huge proponent of that. And I appreciate you giving just the basic understanding and the research from a respected body to show that it benefits everybody. It's not a bad thing. It won't hurt them. It won't stunt their growth. If anything, it'll make them stronger.
And it has to be understood that this period, this is a tough period for the human body going through adolescence. You're getting these growth spurts, and they're putting a demand. Just the growth spurt itself is putting a demand on muscle that wasn't there, simply because the bone is growing, the muscle is growing, and you're kind of losing the equivalent amount of muscle mass you had for your body size. Suddenly dissipates within a couple of months. And suddenly you're still trying to do these activities, these sports, and you kind of just don't have the natural level of muscle mass that you had. So you have to acclimate to that and try to get some more strength.
That is amazing. It makes total sense. There's nothing more I can add to that. That makes total sense. And I hope a lot of the parents who listen to my podcast that have any doubts about their youth athletes participating in a strength program, they do their research and they have a trainer or work with someone who has a basic understanding of how to progress a program in a progressively loaded way, where they're not starting out doing anything crazy, and that goes into everything. I can go on for days about speed and agility, and the joke that crap is about everybody seeing the buzzword speed and agility with no basis of any strength training. I'll cover that later. But okay. In regards to what you do, how do you feel that weightlifting can prevent or help reduce the chances of injury in youth athletes?
Yep. So when we're talking about the performance of the body, the body performs optimally when, if we're looking at you from the side, we see this perfect alignment. If I took a plumb line and I was looking at your ear, your shoulder, your hip, your knee, and your ankle, I would want to see them directly over one another, because that means that your bones are all stacked on one another perfectly. And gravity's pushing through them properly, and they're going to absorb that, and you're going to have the optimal way your body's going to work.
Exactly.
Now, for that to occur, you need to have strength and balance of all muscle. And so that if you're a 14, 15, 16, 18-year-old boy, you're going to go into the gym and you're going to bench press like there's no tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
And you're going to kind of forget that there's got to be a matching muscle in the back.
Exactly.
So you're probably not going to match that out perfectly. And so what's going to happen is, with all the greatest desire to want to do the right thing, you're probably going to end up with an imbalance. And your chest is going to be too strong relationship to your back, and you're going to end up shortening those muscles and pulling your shoulders forward.
Very true.
And lo and behold, you have a misalignment of those bony landmarks. And as a result, your muscles aren't going to be able to function optimally, because muscle force is optimal at an optimal length of the muscle. And that only happens when you have balance of muscle.
Exactly. And just to make sure that people understand, usually when I do an assessment and I have an athlete or anyone come in, usually everybody's shoulders are pulled forward. Everybody's shoulders are pulled forward. They're really tight in this area right here, and their upper back and their shoulder girdle is extremely weak, not activated, and a lot of people have shoulder problems, and they're just not as effective, when they're throwing a ball, when they're catching a ball, when they're running, that can impede your running also.
Absolutely.
In different ways. So that balance between the front, which is the anterior, and the back, which is the posterior of the upper body, is extremely important. And when we talked about in the last podcast, there's a there's a deficiency in posterior training in all ways. So,
Absolutely.
you hit it on the head. I want, one more thing. What do you believe is, in your personal opinion, what's the proper age to begin weightlifting?
Yeah, so I'll go with the American Academy of Pediatrics, man. I'm gonna go with that. I don't.
Okay.
I'm good. I really think that it's the issue of the level of resistance that you use, and that's being very specific. Moderate levels of resistance, which is 50% of the maximum effort, the resistance that the person can push. So, um, I believe in. I'll always be, regardless of the individual. I believe in the concept of a balanced approach to strength training. So that's front to back, side to side, top to bottom. Uh, you know, I'm sure you've been in the gym and you see these guys with these massive,
Oh yeah.
massive upper bodies, and then they have those stick legs.
Oh yeah. Oh
Well,
yeah.
what happened there? What happened to the legs?
Yeah.
Right? And the answer is that it's just easier.
Yeah.
A squat, a straight leg deadlift, that's some very difficult exercise to do, and to do it correctly. And so, and to use a good amount of resistance. So they kind of stay away from it because it's just easy to focus on the upper body.
Exactly.
But I would say that even in whether it's an adolescent or an adult, I want to see balance. I want to see you strengthening your legs as much as your upper body. I want to see you strengthening your back as much as your chest, your bicep as much as your tricep, your hamstring as much as your quad. I want to make sure that your legs are balanced side to side, that you don't develop an over a developed strength on one side than the other. Because let's say that you ended up, you had a natural tendency towards having a stronger left leg, right? And so let's say that you plan on cutting one way or the other. You're always going to cut to the right because you're always going to push off with the left leg because it's your stronger leg. You're subconsciously, without you even recognizing, are going to predispose yourself to having this situation where you're always cutting to the left because you're and so how does that help your performance in terms of the sport itself? You're impeding your ability to be optimally successful because you created a predisposition, a stronger single side. You don't want to go there. This isn't the way we want to do this. We want to make sure every aspect of our body is available to play the activity so that we could be optimally successful at the activity.
Exactly. I totally agree. And one of the things is that I try to focus on, especially in particular sports like baseball, really all sports, being strong on both legs, doing a lot of single leg strengthening exercises, making sure that there's a balance between the two. I had a athlete in here yesterday, and he was doing, we just do hurdle hops over a 6-inch hurdle, where I'm just basically teaching them how to absorb force from the ground, where they hop over a 6-inch hurdle and they land in a squat, which is an eccentric, pretty much eccentric movement. When he did it on his left leg, it looked perfect. When he hopped on his right leg, there was a limited range of motion. He's had issues with his hip. He's had issues with his ankle on his right leg because there is not a balance between both legs. And with him, his balance comes from his posterior chain. His hamstrings are very weak, and they're even weaker on his right leg. And he has a hard time landing in a squat, because when you land in a squat in that eccentric, that weakest point, the hamstring triggers to help you actually stabilize.
Absolutely.
So, I try, with him, we're going to focus a lot more on hamstring, and it's going to be balanced. But, on the right, we're really going to focus on the movement and focus on connecting the mind with the movement, especially with the right leg.
Now, just think about this concept. So let's say this guy suddenly, in the sport he's participating in, it just ends up in this situation where suddenly he's now going to have to push off excessively off that right leg.
Yep.
You openly knew that it was weaker. Guess what's going to happen? He's going to strain.
Exactly. He's going to
He's going to strain.
Yep.
And it's because he didn't recognize that he needed to keep both legs equally as strong, because throughout sports, activity occurs subconsciously. You don't make decisions whether I'm going to use my right leg or my left leg. I'm going to simply do what the activity in the moment calls for. And if there is some predisposed weakness, it's basically lurking, and it's going to present itself, and the person could be susceptible to hurting themselves, and also just not performing at their optimal level. So by doing what you're doing, by doing the single leg strengthening, by doing the single leg functional testing, you're able to pinpoint where the weaknesses are. That's going to save this guy.
Very true. And that was one of the main issues, is he's recovering from a minor injury, I believe in his right leg. And when you overcompensate, and I've had several athletes, and most of them play basketball, to be honest, because you learn to push off one leg, you learn to be a single leg dominant. And I had one kid where his left leg did the exact opposite of his right leg. We would be doing a squat, the right leg looked good, looked perfect. The left leg, the knee would cave in. He would be extremely bogus, which means he'd be knock-kneed on his left leg. And it took me a year to clear that up, to get him to where that leg was, both his legs were balanced. And now he's had a really, really decent season playing AAU basketball.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. If you think about, like you were mentioning, basketball, you know that the average person's going to end up dribbling with their stronger arm, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so if you do not address that early, that person is always going to drive to the basket on one side.
Exactly.
And they're basically opening up to the defense, saying, listen, I don't even have to defend the other side, because I know you can't dribble to that side.
Exactly.
Because you're not strong on that side.
Exactly.
So if that person were to recognize there are strength deficits and technical ability deficits, and were to correct that, they're now a double threat. They make themselves more dangerous.
Exactly.
But if you don't do that, and you just fall into the groove, this is my strong side, I'm going to accept it, and you're limiting your ability to perform and be successful.
Exactly. And I can attest to that. Me on a personal level, when I was in college, I was pretty decent, playing football. I did a workout for the Atlanta Falcons. The guy told me, we did the L drill, which basically is a basic agility drill, and he had me do it from both sides, and I did a great pushing off on my right leg, going to my left, pressing, going to the left. It was fine. Whenever I had to go to my right, pressing off my left leg to change directions, my time was like, it was not good, and it looked clumsy. And he told me, he was like, you look good going to the left, but going to the right, you look like garbage. And that was the deciding factor between me going and getting, getting an opportunity to play, having more teams, be interested in me, and me having and me, basically signing as a free agent out of college. And really, it wasn't the Falcons. It was the regional director for the combine. The regional director for the NFL combine came and worked me out. And that's what he said. It's been such a long time. But those strength imbalances will limit you, and will not allow you to exploit your and use your full athletic talent.
And I just want to make the point. You have all the coaches and all the people working on the technical aspects with these guys and women, and that's all good. But I don't want people to falsely believe that the coach has a in-depth understanding of muscle and balance and things like that. And I just want it to be made clear that these guys got enough to worry about understanding how to enhance the technical aspects of how the athletes perform. I want the the parent to kind of say, you know what, maybe that's a little bit my responsibility
Yeah.
to make sure that I take my child outside of those that are working to enhance their performance in the sport
Mm-hmm.
to somebody who maybe has a better understanding on the side of the fitness aspect of
Mm-hmm.
this.
Very true. Very, and I appreciate that because, you know, I've seen it over the last several years where the parents want the training more than the athlete, and that's because the parent does not really view it. They view it as important, but they don't trust their athletes' work ethic in
Right.
order to invest that. So that basically that does come from the parent. That comes from a parent really selling it to the athlete and really explaining it to the athlete that this is an important part of
Yes.
what you want to do, especially if you want to play beyond, if you want to really play beyond high school. This is very important. So.
Absolutely. I think that's critical. I think that the parent really has to play a critical role in the guidance of what's important, recognizing the whole premise that there is a technical aspect to playing these sports and doing this stuff, but that there's also a physical demand. And that, you know, your ability to perform, talent occurs here.
Yes.
Talent occurs. It's the neural network pathways of the brain that allow you to move in a certain way to cut. But if you don't have the physical capacity to do so, your physical ability will limit you. It will limit you from achieving your ultimate talent level. And that's something I think people really have to understand. There are the two elements. Talent is in the brain, your ability to do what you do. But if you haven't assisted in allowing the body the physical capacity to match your talent level, you're not going to be as successful as you could be.
Very true. Very, very true. I mean, that makes a whole lot of sense. And really, I think we've covered a whole lot in a short amount of time. So, if you have any parting words or anything that you want to actually, add to the whole conversation, and so we can actually continue this and get people to actually realize that strength training and youth sports are hand in hand. That's not separate. Strength training and speed and agility. There's no speed and agility without strength.
Absolutely.
So if you can expound on that a little bit.
Well, if you really want to talk about it from a very technical concept, power, which is what the athlete needs to develop, the actual physics law is force divided by speed squared. That's what power equals. So on top, you have force. Force is strength. And so the way it works is that to be more powerful, you need to first be able to develop more force, strength.
Yes.
Okay. And that comes from weightlifting. Then once you have that strength, the ability to move the strength over a shorter period of time, that is what then has to occur. And that comes from plyometrics, agility training, and all the things you're talking about.
Very true.
So there are two places you can actually increase power: the force that's being pushed and the speed at which you move the force. Those are the two elements. So my attitude is, if there's two possible places to grow and gain, why wouldn't I do both? Why would I only focus just on the shortening the speed of which I move my force? Why not also make more force?
Exactly.
So that's the actual technical aspect of it. Get more force by strength training, then learn how to push that force in a shorter period of time, which then gives you greater power.
Exactly. And that's the premise of the game. And I've actually retooled my training program to include more strength and power movements, so we can so I can develop more youth athletes. I've been playing around with this concept, using some potentiation methods. And basically what potentiation is basically you lift heavy, then you do a dynamic movement within that same movement pattern to improve the potential power that you can generate within that movement. So basically, for example, I have a kid squat like 70 to 80% of his 1 rep max. Then we'll do box jumps. We'll do some variation of some plyometric movement. You know, I do that on a pretty lower level with youth, with younger kids, but it's the same premise. You want to actually develop the potential after you have actually pushed some heavy weight.
So to me, the classic example of that is like, let's say it's the offensive lineman. The offensive lineman is only as successful as he can keep the defender away from him.
Yep.
So you work on getting balance. I'm not just saying bench press, but strengthen the upper back as well. But you're developing a lot of pushing ability with the chest. You could then follow that up with having some sort of weighted ball and throwing it at him and making him throw it back at you as fast as you can. That's taking the strength he's developed and now getting them to learn how to get rid of that, increase their power, push that force in the shortest period of time. So that's like a combination that I would use.
Exactly. Oh yeah, that's applying the strength, and that's one of the main focuses is applying this strength, not just being a weightlifter, being an athlete that can apply the strength that you've gained.
Correct.
So, I mean, well, Doc, I think we've covered everything for the most part.
That's great. I'm glad.
It's pretty short and sweet. If you guys want to follow and reach out to Dr. Yass, all this information will be in the notes and on the podcast and on the YouTube channel. Doc, you got any more parting words?
No, just, you know, it's a great thing to want to be an athlete. Just try to do it as in the healthiest manner that you can, and just get the most out of life. I'm with you, man. Sports is a wonderful thing.
Oh yeah.
Sports is a wonderful thing when it's done in a way that you are doing it to the healthiest ability and getting the most out of it. So, you know, just do what you got to do to achieve that goal, and I think it's a great thing.
Very true. Well, on that note, we're gonna sign off, and I appreciate you, Doc. Thank you so much, and we're gonna have Doc on again, you know, here pretty soon. Hopefully, you know, we talking about some other topics in regards to strength training and how strength training can be more beneficial to you. Thanks. You guys have a great one and train with a purpose. Take care.